truckers called it the Dead Stretch, just a desolate, lonely 50-mile section of Highway 59 that cut through the deep woods of East Texas. The road was old, worn, and notorious among long-haul drivers for strange sightings and eerie occurrences. Jake Henderson, a veteran trucker, never gave much credence to ghost stories or local legends. He was a pragmatic man, focused on hauling loads, meeting deadlines, and paying bills. But that was before one unforgettable night. Jake had just picked up a load from Laredo, Texas, destined for Memphis. He checked his map. The quickest route took him right through the Dead Stretch. He shrugged off the unease that settled over him like a heavy blanket. Jake had driven that road a few times in his career, but it always felt different. He could never explain it, but the air was heavier there, the silence oppressive, the shadows long and unnatural. It was nearing midnight as he approached the entrance to the Dead Stretch. The radio crackled with static, then cut out altogether. A quick glance at his dashboard confirmed he had lost the signal. No music, no chatter, just the low rumble of his rig's engine and the dull thudding of his heartbeat. No big deal, Jake thought. He had driven darker, lonelier roads in worse conditions. The faint outline of trees loomed on either side of the highway, their branches curling like skeletal fingers reaching toward the sky. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting an inky darkness over the landscape. His headlights seemed to be swallowed by the night, barely illuminating the road ahead. Jake yawned, rubbed his eyes, and reached for his thermos. As he unscrewed the cap, something darted across the road. His hands jerked the wheel reflexively, the truck swerving violently to the side before he corrected it. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, his heart hammering in his chest. It wasn't a deer or coyote. He was used to seeing wildlife. This was different, almost human in shape, but twisted, like something had gone terribly wrong in its creation. He shook his head and laughed nervously. "You're seeing things, Jake. Just tired. Too many long nights." He settled back into his seat, gripping the wheel tightly, eyes scanning the darkened road ahead. His knuckles were white under the dim glow of the dashboard lights. For a few miles, everything was quiet again. The steady hum of the engine and the rhythmic bounce of the tires over the cracked asphalt began to lull him back into a sense of normalcy. Then the truck's temperature gauge spiked. A harsh red light blinked angrily on his dashboard. Jake cursed under his breath. This wasn't the place to have engine trouble. He pulled over to the side of the road, the massive rig groaning to a halt. The engine sputtered and died, leaving only silence. Jake sat there for a moment, listening to the absolute stillness around him. Not a single sound, no crickets, no wind, nothing. Just the oppressive quiet. He reached for the CB radio, flipping it on and trying to hail anyone on the road. "Breaker 19, this is Big Jake. Anyone out there?" Static. "Come on, someone's got to be out here. Breaker 19. More static. His fingers tapped nervously on the microphone. Suddenly, the static stopped, replaced by a low, guttural whisper. Jake froze, the sound sending a chill down his spine. It was barely discernible, a voice so faint he wasn't even sure it was real. He strained to hear. "Come back." Jake dropped the mic, his heart racing. He grabbed his flashlight, shoving the door open and stepping out into the night. The cold air bit at his skin as he walked around to the front of the truck. He popped the hood, waving the flashlight over the engine, though he knew he wouldn't find anything. The truck was fine just moments ago. A sound made him stop cold. It was faint, like the crunch of gravel underfoot. Slowly, he lowered the flashlight, its beam sweeping across the deserted highway. In the distance, just at the edge of the light, stood a figure. Jake blinked. He wasn't sure if his tired eyes were playing tricks on him, but the figure seemed to be swaying, slowly, side to side. It was too far away to make out any features, but there was something off about it, something unsettling. "Hey," Jake called, his voice hoarse in the stillness. "You all right?" No response. The figure continued to sway. Jake took a hesitant step forward, shining the flashlight directly on it. As the beam hit the figure, it froze. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The figure wasn't swaying. It was hanging. A man, suspended from a tree branch by a noose, his body limp and swaying gently in the wind that had suddenly picked up. Jake stumbled back, his mind racing. He looked up and down the road. There was no one, no other cars, just the dead man hanging in the middle of nowhere. Panic surged through him. He bolted back to the truck, slamming the door shut and locking it. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the keys, desperately trying to start the engine. The truck roared to life and Jake floored the gas, tearing down the road. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The figure was gone. For a moment, Jake thought he had imagined it all. But then, the whisper returned, louder this time, emanating from the CB radio. "Come back." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. His eyes darted to the radio. It was turned off, yet the whisper continued, relentless, gnawing at the edges of his sanity. "Come back." Jake slammed his fist into the radio, and the whisper stopped abruptly. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had seen. He needed to get off the dead stretch. Now. As he pressed on, something else caught his eye. A pair of headlights in the distance, approaching fast. Relief washed over him. Another trucker. Maybe they'd seen something too, or at least he'd have some company on this cursed road. But as the lights drew closer, Jake's relief turned to dread. The oncoming vehicle wasn't a truck. It was an old, rusted car, one he hadn't seen in decades. His father had owned the same make and model, a '67 Ford Fairlane, back when Jake was just a kid. But that car had been totaled in an accident. Jake knew that because he had been there. His father had died in that crash. The car barreled down the road toward him, headlights blinding. Jake swerved, his heart hammering in his chest. The truck veered wildly, tires screeching on the asphalt. He yanked the wheel back, barely avoiding a ditch, and came to a halt. He sat there, panting, staring into the rearview mirror. The road behind him was empty. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat, and Jake snatched it up, hands shaking. A new text message flashed on the screen from an unknown number. "You can't leave." Before he could react, the headlights reappeared. This time, they were directly behind him. The same rusted car. Jake Owens had been driving long-haul routes for the better part of 2 decades. He'd seen it all. The late-night highway madness, the drunks, the fog so thick you could cut it with a knife. He'd heard stories from other truckers about haunted stretches of road, weird lights in the sky, even truck stops where the ghosts of old drivers supposedly lingered. But Jake didn't believe in that stuff. Ghosts were for movies, and UFOs? Hell, those were for the conspiracy nuts on the fringe of CB radio. It was mid-October, just when the fall air starts to bite, and Jake had a load to haul from Dallas up through the Ozarks, destined for a warehouse in St. Louis. He planned to drive through the night, as usual. The highway was quieter then, and he liked the solitude. He threw his duffel bag into the cab, cranked up the engine, and checked his watch. 11:45 p.m. Perfect. After a quick call to his wife, Jake eased his 18-wheeler onto the interstate. The dashboard glowed dimly in the dark cab, and the only sound was the hum of the engine as he settled into the long, monotonous drive. He lit a cigarette and turned the radio to his favorite classic rock station, filling the cab with the familiar sounds of the Eagles and CCR. It was a couple of hours into the drive, somewhere along a deserted stretch of I-44 in Missouri, that the first strange thing happened. His headlights caught something moving by the side of the road, just at the edge of his vision. It was quick, like a flash of a figure, but too big to be a deer or any kind of animal he'd expect out here. Jake felt a chill creep up his spine. He flicked his eyes to the rearview mirror, expecting to see something. But there was nothing behind him except darkness, the faint red glow of his taillights barely cutting through the inky black. He shrugged it off, convincing himself it was probably just fatigue playing tricks on him. A little farther down the road, his CB radio crackled to life with a burst of static. Jake raised an eyebrow. He hadn't touched the thing in hours, and he wasn't expecting to hear anyone out this late. Then, through the static, a voice cut in, faint at first. "Breaker 19, you there?" Jake leaned forward and grabbed the mic. "Yeah, this is Jake. Who's out there?" Silence. Jake frowned. Maybe it was just interference, or another trucker further up the road. He was about to put the mic down when the voice came again, clearer this time. "Watch out for him." Jake's blood ran cold. The voice was strange, calm, but somehow hollow, like it didn't belong on the radio. He sat there, staring at the mic in his hand, unsure if he should respond or ignore it. Was someone messing with him? He clicked the button again. "Who the hell is this?" he asked, his voice a little more shaky than he'd intended. No answer. Just dead air. Jake set the mic down, his pulse quickening. He tried to focus on the road, but the odd warning echoed in his mind. Watch out for him. Watch out for who? A thick fog had begun to roll in, and the visibility was getting worse. The road ahead disappeared into a sea of mist, and Jake slowed down, squinting through the haze. The fog clung to the road like a wet blanket, swirling in ghostly tendrils as his truck cut through it. For the first time in years, Jake felt uneasy behind the wheel. That's when he saw it. A figure standing on the side of the road, barely visible through the fog, right near a rest stop entrance. The man stood completely still, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was obscured by shadows, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood there, watching the truck approach. Jake slowed the rig, his headlights cutting through the fog as he passed by. The man didn't move, didn't raise a thumb like a hitchhiker would, just stood there, watching. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. He gripped the wheel tightly, his palms slick with sweat. As the truck passed, Jake looked in his rearview mirror. The man was gone. Just vanished. He tapped the brakes and glanced out the window, scanning the side of the road, but there was no sign of the stranger. No sign of anyone. Jake cursed under his breath and pressed the pedal down again, trying to push through the fog and the strange gnawing feeling in his gut. 20 minutes later, he pulled into a truck stop, needing a break from the eerie road. The place was deserted except for a couple of other rigs parked under the dim lights. Jake climbed down from the cab and lit another cigarette, breathing in the cold air and trying to shake off the weirdness of the night. Inside the dingy little diner attached to the truck stop, the air was stale and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Jake ordered a coffee and sat at the counter, his mind still replaying the sight of the man in the fog, the radio's voice, the disappearance. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the waitress said, placing the steaming cup in front of him. Jake forced a smile. "Long night," he muttered. The old man sitting a few stools down chuckled. "You been on the dead man's curve yet?" Jake turned to look at him, raising an eyebrow. "What's that?" The old man leaned in a little, his grizzled face lined with years of hard living. "That stretch of road you're heading toward. They call it Dead Man's Curve. Drivers say they see things out there, things that don't belong on the highway." Jake took a sip of his coffee, trying to ignore the chill that had settled in his bones. "Yeah? Like what?" "Phantoms," the old man whispered, his eyes wide. "Truckers pick up hitchhikers that ain't there. See men standing on the road that vanish when you look back. Hear voices on the radio." Jake froze, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. The old man's words echoed too close to what he had just experienced. "Hey, buddy," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You ever heard a voice on the CB telling you to watch out for him?" The old man's face went pale. He didn't answer for a long moment, then leaned in closer. "You heard that, huh?" His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "Then you got a problem, friend. A real bad problem." Jake stared at him, his pulse pounding in his ears. "What are you talking about?" The old man glanced around, as if checking for anyone listening. "It's him, the man in the hat. They say if you see him, if you hear that voice, it means he's coming for you." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. He slammed the coffee cup down and pushed back from the counter. "That's enough," he muttered. "I don't believe in ghost stories." He tossed some money on the counter and stormed out of the diner, his mind racing. He climbed back into his rig, his hands trembling as he started the engine. The road stretched out in front of him, dark and empty. He drove in silence for a while, the fog still thick around him, the truck rumbling along the highway. The radio stayed silent. The CB turned off. Then, up ahead, he saw something in the fog. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the outline. The same figure. The man in the hat. This time, he was standing in the middle of the road, directly in Jake's path. Jake slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding as he tried to stop, but the man didn't move. Jake's rig hurtled straight toward him, and just before impact, the figure vanished. Gone. Jake sat there, breathing heavily, the fog swirling around the front of his truck. And then, from the passenger seat, came a voice. Calm. Hollow. "I told you to watch out for him." Jake turned slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The man in the hat was sitting in the seat beside him, smiling. And the story ends there. The midnight air was thick with fog as Nate Collins guided his 18-wheeler along a remote highway in northern Nevada. The rumble of the engine was the only sound on that long, empty stretch of road. There was a time when Nate would have enjoyed this part of the job, the freedom, the solitude, the endless blacktop stretching to the horizon. But tonight, something felt off. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive, stifling. Nate had been a trucker for over 15 years, hauling freight across every corner of the country. He was used to lonely nights, endless hours behind the wheel, and the occasional weird encounter. Drunks stumbling onto the road, strange lights flickering in the sky. He'd always shrugged those off, chalking them up to exhaustion or coincidence. But lately something had been gnawing at him, a creeping sense of dread. He couldn't explain it, but it had started about a week ago. He'd been driving late one night through Utah, on a similarly desolate road, when his radio crackled to life with static. Nate hadn't touched the thing in hours, and he didn't expect to hear anyone out there. But as he adjusted the volume, a low voice crackled through the static. "Turn back." The voice had been barely a whisper, almost drowned out by the static, but it was clear enough to make Nate's hair stand on end. He'd tried responding, asking who it was, but the voice didn't come back. He turned the radio off, his hands trembling slightly on the wheel. He finished his run that night, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been warning him, telling him not to go forward. Since then, the feeling of being watched had grown stronger. Every night, Nate felt like something was following him, keeping pace just beyond the edge of his headlights. He hadn't seen anything. Not yet. But tonight, as he guided his truck through the fog, he felt that presence again, closer than ever. He checked the clock on his dashboard. 12:30 a.m. He was already hours behind schedule. A massive storm had slowed him down earlier in the night, and now this damn fog was making visibility impossible. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness. Nate shook his head, trying to focus on the road. "Get it together, Collins," he muttered to himself. "You're just tired. It's all in your head." But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His headlights barely penetrated the wall of fog ahead, casting strange, shifting shadows along the road. The further he drove, the more the road seemed to disappear, swallowed by the dense mist. Up ahead, he saw something, a dim, flickering light on the side of the road. As he got closer, he realized it was a gas station, or what was left of one. The building looked abandoned, its windows shattered, the paint peeling from its walls. A single flickering light above the entrance was the only sign of life. Nate frowned. He didn't remember this place being here, and he had driven this route plenty of times before. But there it was, sitting on the side of the highway, like a relic from another time. A sense of unease settled over him. His instincts told him to keep driving, but he hadn't passed another stop in hours, and his fuel gauge was dipping dangerously low. Reluctantly, he pulled off the road and guided his truck into the gas station's empty lot. The engine rumbled to a stop, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The fog clung to the building, making it look even more sinister. Nate climbed out of the cab, his boots crunching on the gravel as he walked toward the pump. He tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but it was stronger now, like eyes were burning into the back of his neck. The pump was old, ancient even, the kind that hadn't been used in decades. Nate cursed under his breath as he realized there was no way this thing would work. He was about to turn back to his truck when he heard it, a faint creak, like the sound of a door opening slowly behind him. He froze, his heart hammering in his chest. Slowly, he turned toward the gas station. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind, but the night was still. No wind. Nate's skin prickled with goosebumps. "Don't go inside," a voice whispered in his mind, but his feet moved anyway. The door creaked louder as he approached, the darkness inside the building seeming to swallow all light. Nate hesitated at the threshold, peering into the black void beyond. The flickering light above the door cast long shadows across the floor. He stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew hit him hard. The shelves were empty, long abandoned, and the floor was covered in a thin layer of grime. Nate shined his flashlight around the room, his heart pounding louder with each passing second. Then he saw it. A figure standing in the far corner of the store, shrouded in shadow. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. The head was cocked at an unnatural angle, like it had been broken. Nate's breath caught in his throat as the figure slowly turned toward him. It had no face. Nate stumbled backward, crashing into a shelf as the faceless figure took a step forward. Its movements were slow, deliberate, like it was savoring the moment. The flashlight flickered in his hand, casting erratic beams of light around the room. He fumbled for the door, his heart pounding in his ears. Suddenly, the radio in his truck crackled to life, the same voice from before whispering in the static. "Turn back. Turn back." Nate's blood ran cold. He bolted for the door, his boots slipping on the grimy floor. He burst out into the fog, running toward his truck. He could hear the heavy footsteps behind him, slow but steady, growing closer with each passing second. He threw himself into the cab and slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. His breath came in ragged gasps as he jammed the keys into the ignition and floored the gas pedal. The truck roared to life, tires screeching as it tore out of the lot and back onto the highway. For a moment, Nate allowed himself to believe he'd escaped. He glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see nothing but fog, but the figure was there. It stood in the middle of the road, just barely visible through the mist, watching him. And then, it started to move, slowly, but deliberately. It wasn't walking, it was gliding toward him, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. Nate's heart hammered in his chest as he pressed the accelerator to the floor, the truck roaring down the highway. But no matter how fast he went, the figure seemed to keep pace. It was always just behind him, a shadow in the fog, growing closer and closer. The radio crackled again, the voice whispering through the static. "You can't outrun him." Nate's hands tightened on the wheel, his knuckles white with fear. His mind raced, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Was he hallucinating? Was this some kind of nightmare? But it felt too real. The cold sweat on his skin, the pounding of his heart, the weight of the figure's presence just behind him. It was all too real. For hours, Nate drove through the fog, never stopping, never slowing down. The figure remained behind him, always just out of sight, always there. The voice on the radio continued its whispers, filling his mind with dread. "You can't escape." Finally, as dawn began to break, the fog started to lift. The road became clearer, the sky turning a pale shade of gray. Nate glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure still following him. But it was gone. He let out a shaky breath, his body trembling with exhaustion. The weight of the terror from the night still hung over him, but the figure, whatever it was, had disappeared. For now. Nate pulled into a rest stop as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon. He parked the truck and sat there for a long moment, staring out at the empty highway. His heart was still racing, his mind struggling to make sense of what had happened. He reached for the radio, his fingers hovering over the dial. He hesitated, then switched it on. Static filled the cab, but this time, there was no voice, no whispers, just silence. Nate closed his eyes, letting out a long, slow breath. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been following him was gone for good. But deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't over. Not yet. Nate Tucker had been a trucker for almost 20 years, and he knew one thing for sure. Night driving messed with your mind. He'd seen it happen to other truckers, veterans who swore they saw ghosts walking across the highway, or UFOs dipping in and out of the clouds. But not Nate. He'd always kept his mind sharp. Didn't let the miles blur the line between reality and the weird stuff drivers gossiped about at truck stops. He was practical, grounded, and had a wife and 2 kids back home in Kansas City who needed him to be sane. But tonight felt different. The radio hissed static, cutting in and out of country tunes as Nate guided his rig down Route 50, a lonely, endless stretch of highway through the Nevada desert, infamously known as the loneliest road in America. It was 2:30 a.m., and the nearest town was nearly 100 miles away. No other vehicles had passed in over an hour, just the steady hum of his engine and the relentless stretch of road ahead. Maybe the silence is getting to me, he thought, as he glanced at the dashboard clock, the numbers glowing faintly in the dark cab. Nate shook his head and turned the volume knob on the radio, hoping to find a station that didn't fade in and out. The static cleared for a moment, and a gravelly voice broke through, mid-conversation, like someone speaking into a CB radio. "Better watch out. He's out there tonight." The voice crackled and then vanished into the static. Nate frowned, grabbed the CB mic, and pressed the button. "Anyone out there? You got something to say to me?" Nothing but the hiss of white noise. Nate felt a shiver crawl up his spine, but shook it off. Probably some pranksters messing around on the airwaves, bored kids with their dad's CB set. He adjusted his seat, flicked on his high beams, and pressed the pedal down a little harder. The road stretched out in front of him, and the desert landscape blurred in the distance. The stars above were vivid, too bright for comfort, and the vastness of the sky only added to his sense of isolation. Nate focused on the dotted white lines marking the highway, but every now and then he caught movement out of the corner of his eye, just the shadow of a rock or a tumbleweed bouncing across the road. At least, that's what he told himself. A little over 30 miles later, a figure appeared in the distance. At first, Nate thought it was his imagination, but as the truck barreled closer, the shape became clearer. A man, standing on the side of the road, his thumb outstretched in the universal hitchhiker gesture. "Hell no," Nate muttered under his breath. He hadn't picked up a hitchhiker in over a decade, and he wasn't about to start tonight. Not out here. Not in this nowhere stretch of road with no cell signal and miles between civilization. But something about the figure caught his attention. There was a stiffness to the man's posture, an almost unnatural stillness, like he wasn't really waiting to be picked up, but more like watching. As the headlights swept across the man, Nate's heart gave a sharp thud in his chest. The hitchhiker was wearing an old-style trucker's jacket, one of those heavy denim numbers with patches stitched onto it. He looked like he'd walked out of a time warp. His face, however, was completely obscured by the brim of his hat, casting deep shadows over his features. Nate tightened his grip on the steering wheel as his rig roared past the man. In his rearview mirror, he expected to see the hitchhiker fading into the distance, but he didn't. The hitchhiker was gone. What the? Nate blinked and checked the mirror again, but the spot where the man had been standing was empty, like no one had been there at all. He was sure he'd seen him. He hadn't imagined it. A cold chill crept over Nate's skin as he shook his head again, harder this time. He wasn't tired enough to be hallucinating, but maybe he needed a break. He rubbed his eyes, forcing himself to focus on the road ahead. Another 20 minutes passed, and the sense of dread in Nate's gut only grew. Something wasn't right about this stretch of Route 50. He'd driven it a dozen times, and he knew it well enough. But tonight it felt endless. No road signs, no mileage markers, just the same bleak scenery repeating itself. Rocks, scrub brush, and the distant outlines of mountains shrouded in the dark. The CB radio crackled to life again. "Hey, driver." The voice was deeper this time, closer, like the speaker was right there in the cab with him. Nate's blood went cold. He snatched up the mic. "Who's out there?" Silence. A long pause stretched over the radio, the static hissing and popping like it was alive. Then the voice came back, just a whisper now. "You should have picked him up." Nate's heart stopped. He slammed the mic down and flipped off the CB, refusing to listen to another word. His hands were slick with sweat as he gripped the wheel. His mind raced, searching for an explanation. A joke. It had to be a joke. Another driver messing with him. Maybe a signal bouncing off the mountains, but suddenly, his headlights caught movement ahead, Nate's stomach flipped as he saw the hitchhiker again. The same man, same denim jacket, same hat covering his face. Only this time, he wasn't standing on the side of the road. He was in the middle of it. Nate slammed on the brakes. The truck's tires screamed against the asphalt, and the massive vehicle skidded violently, fishtailing across the highway. Nate's heart pounded in his ears as he fought to keep the rig from tipping. The world slowed down as the truck came to a screeching halt, just inches from where the hitchhiker had been standing. But the man was gone. Nate's breath came in shallow, ragged gasps as he stared at the empty road in front of him. His hands shook on the wheel, and for the first time in years, he was genuinely afraid. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, heart racing, adrenaline pumping through his veins. But when he finally blinked back to reality, the fog had rolled in, thick, soupy fog that swallowed everything around him. The road, the desert, the sky, gone. All that remained was the heavy mist and the faint glow of his truck's headlights. Nate swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on him. He reached for the ignition, his fingers trembling as he turned the key. The engine roared to life, but the sound was muted, swallowed by the dense fog. He had to keep moving, had to get out of here. Whatever this was, it wasn't normal. The truck rumbled forward, creeping through the fog. Nate's knuckles were white on the wheel as he inched along, his eyes straining to see even a few feet in front of him. Every nerve in his body was on edge, waiting for something, anything, to jump out at him. The CB radio crackled again, despite being turned off. Too late now. Nate's blood ran cold as he glanced at the radio, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't take it anymore. His instincts screamed at him to run, to get as far away from this road as possible. He pressed down harder on the gas, willing the truck to move faster, but the fog was too thick, the road too narrow. He couldn't risk crashing. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the fog, right in front of him. Nate slammed on the brakes again, but this time it was too late. The truck lurched as something heavy hit the front grille. The sound was sickening, a dull thud, followed by a metallic screech. Nate's heart raced as he brought the rig to a stop and threw open the door, scrambling out of the cab. He ran to the front of the truck, his breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. His boots crunched on the gravel as he rounded the front of the vehicle, expecting to see the body of the hitchhiker crumpled on the road. But there was nothing, just fog. Nate's hands trembled as he ran them through his hair. He backed up, eyes scanning the mist for any sign of what he'd hit. He couldn't have imagined it. He felt the impact. He heard it. Then from behind him came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate. Nate turned around, his breath catching in his throat. The hitchhiker was standing right in front of him, inches away. His head was tilted up now, the brim of his hat pushed back just enough to reveal his face, or what should have been a face. There was nothing there. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, pale skin, stretched tight over bone. Nate stumbled backward, his legs buckling as he hit the ground hard. The faceless figure loomed over him, silent and still, as the radio crackled one last time. "Time to go, driver." Nate screamed, scrambling to his feet, but before he could take another step, the fog closed in around him. The last thing he heard was the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then, silence. No one ever found Nate Tucker or his truck. The only thing left behind was his CB radio, crackling with static, and the whispers. Eddie Malone had been on the road for nearly 20 years. He'd seen it all, from freak snowstorms in the Rockies to tornadoes whipping across the flatlands of Kansas. He prided himself on being a man of logic, a man who didn't believe in ghosts or superstitions. But that night, the one that started like any other long haul, would be the one that made him question everything. It was the dead of night on Interstate 40, slicing through the desolate New Mexico desert. The air was dry, the kind of stillness that presses in around you like a blanket. His 18-wheeler's headlights cut through the darkness, the beams flickering every now and then, as if the desert itself was trying to swallow them. Eddie yawned, keeping one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around his thermos. The strong, bitter coffee was all that kept him from pulling over and passing out right there on the shoulder. The delivery had to be made by morning, no excuses, and that meant no rest until he reached Flagstaff. His CB radio crackled in the background, but for the last hour, it had been nothing but white noise and occasional snatches of conversation from distant truckers too far to make out. He flipped the dial, searching for some music, anything to break the monotony of the endless empty highway. The stars above twinkled like pinpricks in the dark, but out here, there was nothing. Just the road, the desert, and a whole lot of nothing. That's when he saw the lights. At first, Eddie thought it was another truck coming up fast behind him. Bright headlights in his rearview mirror, burning through the darkness like two blazing suns. But as the lights got closer, he realized something was off. The lights were too high, too wide. They didn't belong to a truck or any vehicle he'd ever seen on the road. He squinted, leaning forward to get a better look, but the lights vanished. Gone, as if they'd never been there at all. Eddie shook his head and rubbed his eyes. He was tired, that was all. Exhaustion had a way of messing with your mind. He glanced at the clock, 2:18 a.m., and kept driving, telling himself he just needed to keep moving. The sooner he reached Flagstaff, the sooner he could pull into a motel and sleep it off. But a few miles down the road, the lights returned. This time, they didn't appear behind him. They were in front, floating just above the road, shimmering in the desert air. Two bright orbs, hovering like some kind of eerie signal in the night. Eddie's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he slowed the truck down. The lights were too close to ignore now, too real to be a trick of his tired mind. Damn, Eddie muttered, heart pounding. What the hell is that? He reached for the CB mic, but before he could key it, a voice crackled through the speaker. It was garbled, barely audible, but distinct enough to send a chill down Eddie's spine. Breaker, breaker. The voice hissed, low and distorted. Anyone? Hear me? Anybody out there? Eddie's hand froze over the CB. The voice wasn't one of the usual truckers. It was too faint, too desperate. He stared at the radio for a long moment, then brought the mic to his lips. This is Big Rig Eddie. You all right out there? Silence. He waited, his eyes darting between the road and the CB. The lights ahead flickered again, glowing brighter for a second, then fading into the black desert sky. His truck rumbled on, pushing through the unease that settled like a heavy weight in his chest. Then the voice came again. Big Rig. Eddie. Eddie's blood ran cold. His hand slipped off the mic, his pulse racing. He hadn't given his handle. He hadn't told anyone who he was. His name had never been on the airwaves tonight. The voice crackled, growing louder. You see it yet? Eddie slammed the mic down and hit the gas. The truck roared forward, picking up speed, tires screeching on the asphalt as he tried to put distance between himself and whatever was on that road behind him. His heart thudded in his chest, a sharp spike of adrenaline shooting through him. But the lights reappeared. This time, they weren't in front or behind. They were beside him. Eddie jerked his head to the left and gasped. The lights were pacing his truck, glowing bright in the darkness, hovering at window level, as if they were watching him. His heart pounded in his ears, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts as he swerved to the right, trying to escape whatever this was. But the lights stayed with him, floating effortlessly alongside the truck, matching his speed, as if they had no weight, no substance. "Big rig. Eddie." The voice whispered again, though the CB was silent now. The words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing inside the cab. "Pull over. Eddie." "Hell no," Eddie muttered through clenched teeth. His hands shook as he gripped the wheel, knuckles white. He glanced at the speedometer, 85 miles per hour and climbing, but the lights didn't fall back. They stayed with him, locked on, no matter how fast he pushed the rig. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights vanished. The highway stretched out before him again, empty and quiet, the desert still and silent in the moonlight. Eddie's heart pounded in his chest as he eased off the gas, trying to calm the panic surging through him. His throat was dry, his pulse racing. "Just keep driving," he told himself. "Just keep going." He was about to turn on the radio, hoping for some music to drown out the silence, when something else caught his attention. Movement. In the distance, barely visible at the edge of his high beams, there was a figure standing in the middle of the road. Eddie's breath hitched. It was a man, tall and thin, his head bowed, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his face. He stood perfectly still, not moving, not flinching as the truck barreled toward him. Eddie's foot slammed on the brake. The tires screamed in protest, the truck skidding across the highway as Eddie fought to keep control. The massive vehicle shuddered to a stop, the front bumper inches from the figure. But the man didn't move. He just stood there, his face hidden, hands by his sides, like he'd been waiting for Eddie. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the cab as Eddie's heart raced. His hands trembled as he leaned out the window. "Hey," Eddie shouted. "You all right?" No response. The man didn't move, didn't even flinch. Eddie's skin crawled. Every instinct told him to get out of there, but something kept him frozen in place, staring at the figure. Then, slowly, the man raised his head. The brim of his hat lifted just enough to reveal a pale, gaunt face, hollow eyes staring straight at Eddie. "You should have listened," the man whispered, his voice like gravel grinding against bone. "You should have pulled over." Eddie's heart skipped a beat. He threw the truck into reverse, slamming on the gas as the rig lurched backward. The figure in the road faded into the darkness, but Eddie could still feel those eyes on him, cold and empty, watching. He shifted into drive, speeding down the highway, pushing the truck faster than he ever had before. His hands were slick with sweat, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The road blurred beneath the tires, the desert rushing past him in a haze of fear and adrenaline. For miles, Eddie didn't slow down, didn't look back. He just kept driving, the roar of the engine drowning out the echo of that voice in his head. It wasn't until the faint lights of Flagstaff appeared on the horizon that he finally let himself breathe. Eddie pulled into the truck stop just outside of town, his hands still trembling as he parked the rig. The bright fluorescent lights of the diner felt like salvation after the oppressive darkness of the desert. He sat in the cab for a moment, trying to steady his shaking hands. He wiped the sweat from his brow, breathing heavily, still trying to shake off the night's events. He reached for the CB, half expecting to hear that voice again, but it was dead silent. No static, no crackle, nothing. He flipped the switch, but the radio didn't respond. It was like it had never worked at all. Shaking his head, Eddie stepped out of the truck and made his way into the diner. The familiar clatter of dishes and the smell of fried food grounded him, brought him back to reality. He slid into a booth by the window, ordered a black coffee, and sat there in silence, staring out at the highway. The waitress brought his coffee with a sympathetic smile. "Long night?" Eddie nodded, though he couldn't find the words to explain what had happened out there on the road. It was just the desert, he told himself. The desert plays tricks on your mind. But no matter how many times he tried to convince himself, the memory of those lights, those eyes, lingered. He glanced at the road once more, half expecting to see the figure standing there, waiting for him. But the highway was empty. For now. It was a moonless night on Route 66, the kind of night where the darkness seemed to seep into your bones. Jake Thompson, a seasoned trucker, was hauling a load of machinery across the desolate stretches of Arizona. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic bump of the tires on the asphalt had lulled him into a trance, a comforting routine that made the miles slip by. As he drove, Jake sipped on lukewarm coffee from a thermos, his eyes scanning the empty road ahead. He loved the freedom of the highway, the open space stretching out in every direction. But tonight, something felt different. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind. He switched on the radio, hoping for some chatter, some sign of life out there. Static crackled through the speakers, and then a voice came through, distorted and faint. "Breaker, breaker. Is anyone out there?" Jake straightened, adjusting the volume. "This is Big Rig Jake. Go ahead." But there was no response, just more static. He shrugged it off, turning the dial to search for music. He found an old country station and let it play softly in the background. A few miles down the road, Jake spotted something in the distance, a figure standing by the side of the highway, illuminated by the faint glow of his headlights. As he got closer, he saw it was a young woman, waving frantically. She was soaked, her clothes clinging to her, and her hair hung limp and dark against her pale face. Jake hesitated. Picking up hitchhikers was risky, but the woman looked desperate, scared. He slowed down and pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath his tires. "Need a ride?" he called out, rolling down the window. The woman stepped closer, her face illuminated in the truck's headlights. "Please, I need to get to the next town. My car broke down, and I'm all alone out here." Jake felt a twinge of unease, but pushed it aside. "Hop in. I'll take you there." As she climbed into the cab, Jake noticed she didn't have a bag or anything with her, just the clothes on her back. The woman thanked him repeatedly, her voice shaky. "You're my savior. I thought I'd be stuck out here all night." "No problem," Jake replied, trying to sound reassuring as he pulled back onto the road. "What's your name?" "Emily," she said, glancing out the window. "I didn't think anyone would stop." They drove in silence for a few moments, the radio filling the void with twangy guitars and distant voices. But something felt off. The air inside the cab was cold, and Emily sat rigid in her seat, staring out into the darkness. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, concerned. I just don't like being out here alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "It feels like the night is watching." Jake glanced at her, half smiling to lighten the mood. "Just the desert playing tricks on you. It can get spooky out here." She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. As they drove, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He could see Emily's reflection in the rearview mirror, but her eyes were distant, lost somewhere far away. The radio crackled again, interrupting the uneasy silence. "Breaker, breaker, anyone hear me?" Jake switched off the music and picked up the mic. "This is Big Rig Jake. What's going on?" "Watch out for the hitchhiker. a voice warned, urgent and raspy. "She's not what she seems. She's cursed." Jake's blood ran cold. He turned to look at Emily, but she was staring out the window, expressionless. "Who's cursed?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The hitchhiker," the voice on the radio repeated. "She lures truckers into her trap. Do not let her ride." Jake's mind raced. Was this some kind of sick joke? He glanced at Emily again. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice shaky. She turned to him slowly, her eyes narrowing. "What did they say?" "Nothing. Just some crazy chatter," Jake replied, trying to brush it off. But the unease grew like a storm cloud in his gut. He wanted to kick her out right there, but part of him held back. The road stretched out endlessly, and the landscape around them became increasingly desolate. Just the truck, the woman, and the dark void of the desert. Jake gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. "So, where are you headed?" he asked, desperate to change the subject. "Just a little further up the road to the diner. I just want to get out of this place," she said, her voice low and eerie. They drove on in silence, the tension thickening like fog. Jake couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every glance in the mirror revealed Emily's unwavering stare, her expression unreadable. Then, out of nowhere, the radio crackled again, louder this time. "Big Rig Jake, listen, you need to get rid of her. She'll bring you nothing but bad luck." Jake's heart raced. He turned to Emily, who was now staring at him with an unsettling intensity. "You need to get out," he said, his voice trembling. "Why?" she asked, her tone sharp, her eyes narrowing. "I thought you were helping me." "Things aren't what they seem, Emily. Just get out," he urged, glancing nervously at the road. "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, her voice suddenly icy. "You picked me up. You have to take me to the diner." "Please, just get out," he shouted, the panic rising in his throat. He swerved to the side of the road, slamming on the brakes. But before he could unbuckle his seatbelt, Emily's expression shifted. A chilling smile spread across her face, revealing something unnatural beneath the surface. "You don't really want me to leave, do you, Jake?" His pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" "Remember me?" she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been waiting for someone like you." Jake felt the weight of dread settle in his stomach. "Get out, I'm serious." But she leaned closer, her breath cold against his skin. "You can't escape me. You took too long to stop last time, but I won't let you go again." The truck's interior chilled, and he could see his breath misting in the air. Jake fumbled for the door handle, but Emily's hand shot out, gripping his arm with an unnatural strength. "Let go of me!" he yelled, trying to break free. Suddenly, the radio blared to life, a cacophony of voices screaming warnings, drowning out the sound of his own heartbeat. "Get out, Jake! Get away!" With a surge of adrenaline, Jake tore himself from her grasp and flung the door open, stumbling out into the cool night air. He ran, heart pounding, the gravel crunching beneath his feet as he glanced back at the truck. Emily was standing in the cab, her eyes glowing in the dark. "You can't leave me," she called, her voice echoing in the silence. "You're mine." He didn't look back as he sprinted into the darkness, panic fueling his every step. The desert was vast, but he ran with everything he had, desperate to escape whatever curse she carried. Behind him, the truck's engine roared to life, tires screeching as it peeled away from the shoulder. Jake's breath hitched. He turned to see the truck speeding down the highway, Emily's face peering out the window, a wicked grin plastered across her features. "Jake," she yelled, her voice echoing in the night. "You can't run from me." Suddenly, he stumbled, falling to the ground as fear overwhelmed him. He looked up, and for a moment, The world felt still. The stars above twinkled, but they felt cold, distant. Then he heard it, a low hum growing louder, vibrating through the ground. It was the sound of the truck turning around, coming back for him. Panic surged anew as he scrambled to his feet, looking for somewhere to hide. There was nothing but endless desert, the flat expanse stretching out in all directions. The truck's headlights pierced through the darkness, illuminating the sand and sagebrush. Jake ran, heart pounding, but he knew he couldn't escape. No matter how fast he ran, she would always be there, lurking just behind him. Suddenly, the truck screeched to a halt, and the doors swung open. Emily stepped out, her figure silhouetted against the glow of the headlights, a haunting presence in the night. "Why won't you stop running?" she called, her voice echoing in the silence. "I just want to take you home." Jake stumbled backward, fear coursing through his veins. "Stay away from me!" he screamed. "Why are you afraid?" she asked, her smile widening. "You've seen what I can do. You can't escape your fate." In that moment, realization hit him like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just a hitchhiker. She was a specter of the road, a haunting figure that preyed on lost souls. "Leave me alone," he cried, desperation creeping into his voice. But Emily only laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down his spine. "You can't escape me, Jake. I'm part of this highway now. I'll always be here." The ground beneath him trembled as shadows swirled around, dark figures rising from the sand, joining her in the night. Jake's heart raced as he turned to run again, but it was too late. The shadows closed in, surrounding him, their cold presence suffocating. "Welcome to the curse, Jake," Emily whispered, her voice wrapping around him like chains. "You'll never leave." And as the darkness engulfed him, Jake realized the truth. In the world of the highway, the hitchhiker's curse was real, and now he was a part of it. The next morning, truckers would pass the spot on Route 66, the sun shining brightly, but they'd tell tales of the eerie hitchhiker who lured drivers into the night, warning each other with hushed voices to stay clear of the cursed road. And if you listened closely, you might just hear the echoes of Jake's screams, forever lost in the void of the desert. It was a starless night on I-40, the kind of night that swallows sound, leaving only the dull roar of the engine. Tom "Big Rig" Carter had been on the road for hours, driving his 18-wheeler through the vast emptiness of New Mexico. The highway stretched before him like a black ribbon, the only companion his radio, which had been eerily quiet. Tom was a seasoned trucker, having navigated this route countless times. But tonight, the air felt thick with something unsettling. He rubbed his eyes, fighting fatigue, and reached for the coffee thermos, hoping for a jolt of energy. Just as he poured, a flicker of light caught his attention in the rearview mirror. A pair of headlights was approaching fast, tailgating him closely. Tom frowned. It was unusual for anyone to be out here at this hour, especially at such speed. He glanced at the speedometer, over 100 miles per hour. "What the hell?" he muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. As the car drew closer, he could make out the shape, a dark sedan, sleek and ominous. The driver was weaving in and out of the lane, clearly agitated. Tom's heart raced. He could feel the tension in the air as the car pulled up alongside him. "Hey there!" Tom shouted, leaning out the window, but the driver didn't respond. Instead, they accelerated, darting ahead before swerving back into his lane. "Crazy bastard," Tom grumbled, shaking his head. Moments later, the sedan abruptly slowed down, veering onto the shoulder. Tom's instincts screamed at him to keep driving, but something compelled him to look back. The driver was standing by the car, waving wildly, their silhouette illuminated by the truck's headlights. Tom hesitated, then pulled over. "What's wrong?" he called out, rolling down the window. The figure was a young man, his face pale and frantic. "You have to help me. They're coming for me." Tom's stomach churned. "Who's coming?" he asked cautiously. Before the man could respond, headlights appeared in the distance, growing larger and brighter. The young man's eyes widened in terror. "You don't understand. They'll kill us both." Tom's pulse quickened. "Get in the truck." Without waiting for a response, the man jumped into the passenger seat, slamming the door behind him. Tom hit the gas, his heart pounding as he glanced in the rearview mirror. The headlights of the approaching car were unmistakable. Another sedan, dark and sleek, closing in fast. "Drive!" the young man screamed. "Don't let them catch us!" Tom floored it, the engine roaring as he pushed the truck to its limits. The other car was right on their tail, relentless and aggressive. "What do they want?" Tom shouted, trying to keep his voice steady. "They think I know something," the man gasped. "But I don't, I swear." As they sped down the highway, the pursuing car swerved violently, attempting to box them in. Tom's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. "Hold on!" He swerved to the left, narrowly avoiding a collision. The truck shuddered as he maneuvered into the opposite lane, the oncoming headlights blinding him. "Where's the nearest exit?" he yelled. "About a mile up," the man replied, his voice tinged with panic. "Turn right." Tom took a sharp right at the next exit, gravel kicking up behind them as they sped down a dark country road. He could hear the engine of the pursuing car roaring behind them, determined not to let them escape. "Just keep driving," the young man urged, fear etched on his face. "Don't stop until we lose them." As they tore through the night, Tom's mind raced. Who was chasing them? What did they want? The questions hung heavy in the air as the trees lining the road blurred past. Suddenly, the headlights behind them flickered. "They're losing us!" Tom shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. But just as hope surged, the other car surged forward, its headlights illuminating a dark figure standing in the middle of the road. Tom slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt. "What the hell?" Tom gasped, his heart dropping. The figure stepped closer, a woman, her hair wild and disheveled, her eyes wild with fear. "Help me!" she cried, raising her arms. "Don't!" the young man shouted. "Keep going!" But it was too late. Tom's instincts kicked in, and he swerved to avoid the woman, the truck veering off the road into a ditch. The world spun as they crashed, metal crunching and glass shattering. Tom braced himself as the truck came to a stop, smoke billowing from the engine. Dazed, Tom blinked, trying to regain his bearings. He turned to the young man, who was staring out the window, frozen in fear. "They're here," he whispered, his voice trembling. Tom glanced back, and his stomach dropped. The pursuing car had come to a stop, its headlights illuminating the wreckage of the truck. Shadows moved around the car, dark figures emerging from the night. "We have to get out of here," Tom yelled, scrambling to open his door. But before he could get out, the young man gripped his arm. "You don't understand! They'll take us!" The figures moved closer, their faces obscured in the darkness. Tom's heart raced. He could feel the weight of their presence, a suffocating dread enveloping him. "Who are they?" Tom shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Hunters!" the young man cried. "They hunt people like us!" Before Tom could process the words, the first figure reached the truck. It leaned down, peering inside with eyes that glowed like embers. "Out!" it commanded, its voice a low growl. Tom's pulse raced as he looked at the young man, who was trembling in fear. "We have to run!" Tom yelled. But the man's expression shifted, his eyes wide with recognition. "No! They'll know!" Suddenly, the second figure was at the passenger side, yanking the door open. The young man shrieked, scrambling back in his seat. "No! Please! Tom lunged for the door, but the hunters were too fast. They grabbed the young man, dragging him out of the truck, his screams echoing in the night. "Help me!" he cried, panic flooding his voice. "Get back!" Tom shouted, desperation flooding his veins. But the hunters were relentless, pulling the young man into the shadows, his cries fading into the darkness. Tom felt his heart pound in his chest as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. "Run!" the voice inside him screamed. With all the strength he could muster, Tom threw himself out of the truck and sprinted into the night, the adrenaline pushing him forward. He could hear the hunters behind him, the sound of their footsteps thundering in pursuit. He ran into the dense underbrush, branches scratching at his skin, the night closing in around him. He didn't look back, fear propelling him forward. The world around him was a blur, the darkness swallowing him whole. But he could still hear the distant sounds of the hunters, their voices echoing like a haunting melody. "Join us! Join us!" Tom stumbled through the trees, gasping for breath. He could feel the weight of their gaze on him, an invisible force pulling him back toward the horror. Suddenly, he burst through the trees and onto a dirt road, illuminated by the faint glow of a nearby gas station. Hope surged within him, and he sprinted toward the light, his heart racing. "Help!" he shouted, his voice hoarse and desperate. As he reached the gas station, he saw the flickering neon sign, a beacon in the dark. But as he approached, he noticed something strange. The station was empty, the doors locked tight. Panic surged through him. "Hello?" he yelled, pounding on the door. Silence answered him, the only sound his own breath echoing in the stillness. He glanced back, half expecting the hunters to emerge from the shadows. Then he heard it, a faint whisper rising from the darkness. "Join us." Tom spun around, his heart pounding. The figures were closing in, shadows spilling from the trees, their eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. He backed away from the door, searching for any way to escape. But the hunters were upon him, their presence suffocating, enveloping him in darkness. "Please don't!" he cried, but their laughter echoed in his ears, chilling him to the bone. "Join us, Tom," one of them hissed, stepping closer, a malevolent grin spreading across its face. "You can't escape your fate." The world around him began to blur, and Tom felt himself being pulled into the shadows, the darkness wrapping around him like a shroud. He struggled against it, but it was too late. As he was engulfed by the night, the gas station stood silent, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows across the ground. In the distance, the sound of a truck engine echoed through the empty highway, but no one would ever stop to notice the fate that awaited Tom Big Rig Carter. The night swallowed the road whole, leaving only whispers of the lost, tales of those who ventured too far into the dark, never to return. And the hunters would wait, ever watchful for the next unsuspecting traveler on the lonely highway. Feel free to adjust, or let me know if you need something else. It was a moonless night on Interstate 40, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole. Mike Road King Thompson was at the wheel of his big rig, hauling a load of steel across the endless expanse of the New Mexico desert. The engine's hum was a familiar comfort, but tonight, an unsettling tension hung in the air. As the clock ticked past midnight, the landscape outside transformed into an abyss. The only signs of life were the occasional flickering lights of distant gas stations. Mike adjusted his cap and took a swig of coffee from his thermos, the bitter liquid doing little to shake off the creeping unease. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, a voice breaking through the static. "Breaker! Breaker! Any truckers out there?" Mike leaned in closer, intrigued. "This is Road King. What's your 20? Listen up, folks. There's something weird going on out here tonight. Be on the lookout." Before Mike could respond, the voice faded, replaced by static. He frowned, brushing it off as just another trucker's tale. The road ahead was empty, stretching on like an endless ribbon. A few miles down the road, Mike noticed a flicker of headlights in his rearview mirror. A dark pickup was gaining on him, weaving dangerously between lanes. "What's this idiot doing?" he muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The pickup pulled alongside him, and Mike glanced over. The driver was a scruffy-looking man, his face partially hidden under a baseball cap. He yelled something, but Mike couldn't hear over the roar of the wind. "Get a grip, buddy!" he shouted back, trying to ignore the man's erratic behavior. But the pickup driver wasn't done. He swerved dangerously close, and Mike instinctively hit the brakes. The pickup darted ahead, then slammed on its brakes, forcing Mike to react quickly. "What the hell?" Mike shouted, his heart racing. Just then, the radio crackled again, this time a frantic voice. "Road King, you need to get off this highway. It's not safe." Mike's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "There's a shadow on the road. It's hunting." Before he could ask for more information, the signal faded into static. He shook his head, dismissing it as nonsense, but a sense of dread washed over him. As he continued driving, the pickup was nowhere to be seen. Mike exhaled slowly, the tension easing slightly. But then he felt it, an unsettling chill creeping through the cab, as if the very air had thickened. In the distance, he spotted a figure standing by the roadside. It was a woman, her clothes tattered, hair wild, and eyes wide with fear. Mike slowed down, curiosity peaking. "Need a lift?" he called out. The woman rushed to the door, her face pale. "Please, you have to help me." "What's wrong?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. "They're coming for me," she gasped, glancing over her shoulder, her eyes filled with panic. "Who's coming?" Mike pressed, but before she could answer, a shadow flickered in the distance. The woman's eyes widened even more. "We have to go, now." Mike nodded, his instincts kicking in. He unlocked the door, and she jumped in, slamming it shut behind her. "Drive," she urged, her voice shaking. Without a second thought, he hit the gas, the truck roaring to life. As they sped away, Mike glanced in the rearview mirror. The darkness seemed to pulse, shadows dancing along the roadside. "Who was chasing you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The shadow," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It hunts at night. It preys on the lost." Mike's grip tightened on the wheel. "What do you mean, hunts?" "I don't know how to explain it. It's like a nightmare come to life. You can feel it watching you." As they drove, the woman's fear was palpable. Mike's heart raced as he noticed the shadows gathering along the roadside, darker and more defined. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the reach of his headlights. Suddenly, the radio crackled again. "Road King, you're in danger! Turn around! Get off the highway!" "Why? What's happening?" Mike shouted, but the voice was drowned out by static. "Please!" the woman cried, gripping the armrest. "We need to get away from here!" Mike pressed the accelerator, determined to put distance between them and whatever was chasing them. But the air grew heavier, the shadows thicker, as if the night itself was closing in. Then, out of nowhere, the truck jolted violently. "What the?" Mike exclaimed, struggling to maintain control. The engine sputtered, and the headlights flickered. "It's here!" the woman screamed, her face pale with terror. "Hold on!" Mike shouted, trying to keep the truck steady as it swayed dangerously. He fought with the steering wheel, heart pounding in his chest. The shadows outside twisted and writhed, an ominous presence looming just beyond the light. Then, with a deafening roar, the truck sputtered and stalled. Darkness enveloped them, the engine silent, and Mike's stomach dropped. "Get out!" the woman urged, her voice frantic. "Are you crazy?" Mike shot back, but a chilling breeze swept through the cab, carrying whispers that sent shivers down his spine. "Now!" she insisted, unbuckling her seatbelt. With no other choice, Mike followed her lead. They both tumbled out of the truck, landing on the gravel with a thud. "Where do we go?" Mike gasped, his breath visible in the cold air. "Into the woods!" she shouted, pointing toward a dark expanse of trees. Mike nodded, adrenaline pumping through him as they sprinted into the forest. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, an almost tangible force pursuing them. Branches snapped underfoot as they ran deeper into the darkness. Mike glanced back, the truck now just a silhouette against the night. "Do you know where we're going?" he yelled, breathless. "No, just keep running," she urged, panic rising in her voice. They plunged deeper into the woods, the air growing colder, suffocating. Shadows darted between the trees, taunting them, whispering their names. "Please, let's find shelter," Mike shouted, desperation creeping in. Just then, they stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin, its windows shattered, door hanging ajar. "In there!" the woman shouted, rushing toward it. They burst through the door, slamming it shut behind them. The cabin was dark, the air thick with dust. "Do you have a phone?" Mike asked, searching the room frantically. "No, I lost mine," she replied, her voice trembling. They huddled together in the corner, hearts racing, listening for any signs of movement outside. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them, chilling to the bone. "Why is it after you?" Mike asked, trying to make sense of it all. "I don't know," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "I was just driving home when it appeared in the road. I barely escaped." A shadow passed by the window, and they both froze. The whispers intensified, echoing through the cabin. "Join us. Join us." "What does that mean?" Mike asked, fear tightening his chest. "It wants to take us," she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Suddenly, the door creaked open, swinging wide on its hinges. Darkness flooded the room, and a figure emerged, tall and menacing, cloaked in shadows. "Run!" Mike yelled, grabbing her hand as they bolted toward the back of the cabin. But as they reached the rear door, it slammed shut, trapping them inside. The figure stepped closer, a dark silhouette against the faint light. "Join us," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper. Mike could feel the cold seeping into his bones as the shadows wrapped around him, pulling him toward the figure. He struggled against it, but the darkness was too strong. "Fight it!" the woman cried, tears streaming down her face. With every ounce of strength, Mike pushed back against the darkness, reaching for the door. He could feel the whispers swirling around him, taunting him, urging him to give in. "Join us! Join us!" "No!" Mike shouted, determination surging through him. "I won't!" With one final effort, he threw himself against the door, and it burst open. They stumbled out into the night, the darkness howling behind them. "Keep running," Mike urged, and they sprinted into the woods, hearts pounding in their chests. But the figure followed, its whispers echoing in the night. "You cannot escape." They ran until they could no longer hear the whispers, until the shadows began to recede. Eventually, they reached a road, the distant glow of headlights cutting through the darkness. "Look!" the woman shouted, pointing. "A car!" With renewed hope, they ran toward it, waving their arms. The vehicle slowed, and the driver rolled down the window, concern etched on their face. "Are you guys okay?" the driver asked. "Please, we need to get out of here," Mike shouted. Without hesitation, the driver opened the door, and they jumped inside, slamming it shut. As they sped away, Mike glanced back, the woods disappearing behind them. "What was that thing?" he asked, still shaken. "I don't know," the woman replied, her voice trembling. "But it's not over. It will always be looking for us." Mike felt a chill creep up his spine. The night had swallowed their escape, and as they drove on, he couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was still out there, waiting for its next victim. And somewhere on the desolate road, the whispers lingered, echoing the names of those lost to the darkness, a haunting reminder that some things can never be outrun. And so, the legend of the shadow on Route 66 grew, whispered among truckers, a warning to those who dared to drive through the haunted night. If you have any specific requests or changes in mind, feel free to let me know. On a stretch of Highway 37, where the stars barely pierced the veil of night, Jack Iron Horse Reynolds was at the wheel of his 18-wheeler. The hum of the engine was a familiar lullaby, but tonight, an unsettling tension hung in the air. He'd been on the road for over 10 hours, the fatigue settling into his bones like a thick fog. As he navigated the winding road through the hills of California, he flicked on the radio, hoping for some company. Static crackled before a voice broke through. "Attention all truckers on Highway 37. There's been strange reports of a phantom hitchhiker. Stay alert." Jack chuckled darkly, shaking his head. Just another ghost story, he muttered to himself. He'd heard the tales before, urban legends that circulated among truckers. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few miles down the road, he noticed headlights in his rearview mirror, growing larger and larger. A sleek black pickup was tailing him too closely for comfort. What's this jerk's problem? Jack thought, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The pickup swerved to the side, pulling up next to him. Jack glanced over, and the driver, a young man with wild eyes, was gesturing frantically. Jack rolled down his window. "What's wrong?" "Get off this road! You have to get off!" the man shouted, panic etched on his face. "Why?" Jack asked, confused. "The hitchhiker. She's real. Get away!" The man's voice was nearly drowned out by the rush of the wind, and before Jack could respond, the pickup sped off into the night. "What a nut," Jack muttered, shaking his head as he rolled up the window. But unease settled in his stomach like a heavy stone. He pressed on, the darkness closing in around him. Minutes later, he spotted a figure by the roadside, a woman dressed in white, her long hair blowing in the breeze. Jack's heart raced. Is this the hitchhiker? He thought, recalling the tales he'd heard. He slowed down, curiosity piqued. As he drew closer, the woman raised her hand, signaling for him to stop. Jack hesitated, but ultimately pulled over, the gravel crunching under his tires. "Need a lift?" he called out, opening the door. The woman stepped closer, her face illuminated by the truck's headlights. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Please, I need to get away from here." Jack frowned, sensing something was off. "Where are you headed?" "Just drive, please," she pleaded, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Against his better judgment, he nodded and let her climb into the passenger seat. "Buckle up," he said, and they were off, the truck rumbling back onto the highway. "What's going on? Why are you out here alone?" Jack asked, trying to break the tension. "I was just driving home when I saw her," the woman replied, her voice trembling. "She was standing by the road, looking lost. I thought she needed help, but when I stopped, it was like she wanted me to join her." Jack's grip tightened on the wheel. "What do you mean, join her?" The woman swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously. She's not human. She wants to take people." Jack shook his head, trying to dismiss her words. "It's just a ghost story. There's no such thing as a hitchhiker who takes people." But deep down, a gnawing fear settled in. The road ahead was dark, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. He glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the wild-eyed driver again, but it was just darkness. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked, noticing how pale the woman looked. I can't go back. I don't want to see her again," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who? The hitchhiker?" Jack asked. His curiosity piqued. Yes, she's a warning, a spirit that lures you in. I've seen her before. Jack felt a chill run down his spine, but he pressed on. What do you mean you've seen her before? I was driving with my friend. She picked us up, and then... The woman paused, taking a shaky breath. My friend disappeared. I thought I could help, but I was wrong. Jack's heart raced as he processed her words. And now you think she's after you? The woman nodded, her hands trembling. I can feel her. She's close. Suddenly, the truck's headlights flickered and the engine sputtered. What the? Jack muttered, trying to keep the truck steady. Keep driving, the woman screamed, her eyes wide with terror. He pressed on the gas, but the truck began to slow down, the engine groaning. Come on, not now. Jack gritted his teeth, fighting against the controls. The lights dimmed further, and he could see it. Just at the edge of the headlights, a shadow moving alongside the road, gliding effortlessly. There she is, the woman cried, pointing. Don't look. But Jack couldn't help it. He turned his head, and there she was, a translucent figure in a tattered white dress, her hair flowing like smoke, her eyes hollow and dark. Drive faster, the woman urged, panic rising in her voice. He slammed the accelerator to the floor, but the truck was losing power. The ghostly figure seemed to smile, her mouth stretching unnaturally wide, and a bone-chilling laugh echoed in the night air. We're not going to make it, Jack shouted, fear flooding his veins. Don't let her in. Whatever you do, don't let her in, the woman screamed, gripping the dashboard. Jack's heart raced as he fought against the fading engine. The woman's eyes locked onto the figure, her expression shifting from fear to something else. Recognition. She's trying to trick you. Don't listen to her, the woman yelled, but it was too late. The headlights flickered one last time before plunging them into darkness. The truck rolled to a halt, and the engine went silent. We have to get out, Jack said, his voice shaking. No, she'll get us, the woman cried, but the door suddenly swung open, as if pulled by an unseen force. The woman's scream pierced the silence, and Jack felt a cold breeze wash over him. In a desperate attempt, he lunged for the door, but something pulled him back, a cold grip around his wrist. He turned to see the hitchhiker, her face mere inches from his. Join me, she whispered, her breath chilling him to the bone. Get away from me, Jack yelled, but the darkness pressed in around him. Jack, the woman shouted, but her voice was fading, drowned out by the laughter of the spirit. In that moment, Jack felt a surge of adrenaline. No, he shouted, breaking free from the grip and stumbling backward. He ran toward the trees lining the road, not looking back as he plunged into the darkness. Branches clawed at his skin, but he didn't care. Survival was all that mattered. Behind him, he could hear the laughter echoing through the night, the whispers calling his name. Join us. Join us. He pushed through the underbrush, adrenaline fueling his escape. But the darkness felt alive, as if it were reaching for him, trying to drag him back. Please, let me go, he gasped, tears streaming down his face as he fought against the pull of the shadows. After what felt like an eternity, he stumbled into a clearing, breathless and trembling. The laughter faded, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Jack had escaped, but the fear remained, a lingering shadow in his mind. He knew he couldn't go back to the road, not after what he'd seen. The moon finally broke through the clouds, illuminating the clearing, and for a moment, Jack thought he was safe. But then he heard it, a whisper on the wind, soft and insidious. You can't escape. As dawn broke, Jack was still in the clearing, too terrified to move. He could feel the eyes of the night watching him, waiting for the moment he would return to the road. And as the sun rose, casting light on the path, Jack understood the truth. Some roads are better left untraveled, and some ghosts never truly let go. The tales of the hitchhiker on Highway 37 would spread among truckers, warnings whispered in hushed tones about the darkness that lurked beyond the headlights. And somewhere, on that lonely road, the hitchhiker would wait for her next victim, her laughter echoing through the night. Feel free to ask for any adjustments or more details. It was a moonless night on Highway 95, the kind of night that cloaked the road in an unsettling darkness. Tom Big Rig Harris had been driving for hours, the hum of his 18-wheeler a steady backdrop to his thoughts. As a seasoned trucker, he had seen his share of oddities on the road, but something felt off tonight. He switched on the radio, searching for anything to fill the silence. A voice crackled through the static, urgent and frantic. "Attention, all drivers. Beware the hitchhiker on Highway 95. She's dangerous. Stay away." Tom frowned. He had heard tales of ghostly hitchhikers before, but he always dismissed them. Yet an eerie chill crept over him as he glanced in the rearview mirror. The road was empty, but the shadows seemed to dance along the edges, whispering secrets he couldn't understand. A few miles later, he spotted a figure standing by the roadside. A woman in a white dress, her hair wild in the wind, looking lost. Against his better judgment, he slowed down. "Need a ride?" he called out, the words tumbling from his lips before he could think. The woman stepped closer, her eyes wide and pleading. "Please, I need help." Tom hesitated but opened the door. "Where are you headed?" "Just drive, please," she urged, climbing into the cab, her breath shaky. He drove on, the headlights illuminating the empty road ahead. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to make conversation. "Anna," she replied, her voice trembling. "I shouldn't have been out there." "Why not?" he probed, his curiosity piqued. "Because she's looking for me," Anna whispered, glancing nervously at the darkness outside. "Who?" "The hitchhiker. She wants to take me back." A chill ran down Tom's spine, but he forced a laugh. "It's just a story, Anna. There's nothing out here." But as the miles rolled on, the atmosphere grew heavier, and he felt an inexplicable urge to glance in the rearview mirror. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a shadow flicker behind them. "What's wrong?" Anna asked, her voice quaking. "Nothing," he lied, tightening his grip on the wheel, but doubt gnawed at him. Suddenly, the engine sputtered, and the lights dimmed. "No, no, no," Tom exclaimed, slamming the gas pedal. The truck hesitated before finally roaring back to life. "Keep driving," Anna cried, panic in her voice. Tom pushed the truck harder, but the darkness seemed to press in around them. The air grew cold, and Tom felt a presence behind him, something sinister. Then, out of nowhere, a figure emerged in the headlights, a ghostly version of Anna, identical yet wrong, her eyes filled with malice. "Join me," the apparition whispered, reaching out with a skeletal hand. "Get away from her," Tom shouted, heart racing. The real Anna shrieked, clutching her head. "No, don't let her in." Tom fought to keep his focus, swerving the truck as the shadows swirled around them, the ghostly figure beckoning. With every ounce of strength, he pressed the accelerator, trying to outrun the darkness, but the road twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the nightmare. Finally, the truck lurched forward, the engine sputtering again. Desperate, Tom slammed the brakes, and they skidded to a stop. "Get out!" he yelled, and they both scrambled from the cab. In the distance, he heard the laughter of the shadow, echoing in the night. "Run!" Anna screamed, and they dashed into the trees, branches scratching at their skin. They stumbled through the underbrush, breathless and terrified. But the darkness was alive, and Tom could feel it closing in around them. "Keep going," Anna urged, but fatigue was setting in. Finally, they reached a clearing, moonlight spilling down like a beacon of hope. They paused, gasping for air, but the laughter followed them, chilling their bones. "What do we do now?" Tom asked, fear creeping into his voice. "Don't look back," Anna warned, her eyes wide with terror. But Tom couldn't help it. He turned and saw the hitchhiker standing at the edge of the clearing, her ghostly form shimmering in the moonlight. "Join us," she whispered again, and a wave of despair washed over him. "No!" Tom shouted, desperation flooding his voice. Suddenly, Anna grabbed his arm. "We have to go back. We can't let her win." With no time to waste, they turned and ran toward the highway, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. The hitchhiker was gaining on them. Just as they reached the road, headlights appeared in the distance. A truck. "Help!" Tom yelled, waving his arms frantically. The truck slowed, and the driver looked out, eyes wide with confusion. "What's going on?" "Please, we need to get out of here," Anna pleaded. Without hesitation, the driver opened the door, and they jumped inside, slamming it shut behind them. As they sped away, Tom glanced back one last time. The hitchhiker stood at the roadside, her expression twisted in rage, the darkness swirling around her like a storm. "Drive," Anna urged, her voice shaking. The driver hit the gas, and they tore down the highway, leaving the nightmare behind. But even as the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the road, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they had merely escaped. In the back of his mind, the whispers lingered, a haunting reminder of the shadows that lay just beyond the headlights. And somewhere on that desolate stretch of Highway 95, the hitchhiker waited, her laughter echoing in the wind, searching for her next victim. If you need any adjustments or further details, feel free to ask.